Yeah, so these are parts of my notes. A piece that I was writing, a piece of music that I was writing, and these tables, these sort of tables, are a way to determine if a chord can be played on the violin or the cello or on the viola, etc. So you see right here, these are the open notes for the cello, C2, G2, D3, and A3. These are the open notes. And these are the notes that I'm trying to see if they could be played upon on the cello. And I just enter those notes. You see the biggest one is to the left. The highest note is to the left, and right here the highest note of the open notes of the cello is up, and I just enter the difference, the distance. A3 to E4 is a fifth, D3 to G sharp 3 is a fifth. You don't have to talk about the altered, and you just check certain things. You're going to compare these numbers. You put these numbers in. It's a trick to do this, and these are the notes for the the viola. The same notes for the viola, you see. A C3, G3, D4, A4, and I put the notes that I want. Again, the highest note is to the left, so it's and I try to see if they could be played, etc. And this one's for the violin. You could see that G3, D4, A4, E5 are the open notes for the violin, and I just enter the notes that I'm wondering whether these notes can be played as a chord on the violin, and I enter the intervals that the difference, like an E5 to a C6 is an E5 to a C6 is a sixth, and an A4 to a G sharp 5 is a seventh, etc. You just do that, and then you can what you do next is yes. So what you do is you check. You just have to, when you have these numbers, it's very simple. You just enter the differences. It's very easy to tell what the intervals are. The distance between the notes that are here in the right here, and these notes that are corresponding. And remember, since you're playing them on top of those notes, you can't have two notes on the same row, and you can't have two notes on the same column either. Because a G sharp 3 is not going to be played on two strings at the same time. So you have to put one entry. It makes it even easier. Usually, it's going to be the diagonal. You just enter them, and now what you do is you take the biggest number you get. You take the biggest number, you subtract the smallest. And you make sure that is, that it's smaller, the difference is smaller, smaller, not bigger. That it's smaller than or equal to the spread. Now, what the spread is what we're going to be covering. What I'll cover in the in an upcoming video. You take the biggest of those numbers. You just look at it. In this case, you look at the 5 and 2. Now, the difference between a fifth and a second is actually a fourth. And if you allow a spread of a fourth or a fifth, then you're in the clear. So this chord can be played. Actually, you have to check something else. Biggest minus smallest is smaller than or equal to the spread. And you also look if the smallest is smaller than or equal to the gap, which is something else we'll cover. We're going to cover if it can't be bigger than the gap. The smallest number cannot be bigger than the gap. In this case, a second, and we'll see that the gap is usually going to be at least that. So it's not an issue in this case, Okay, so that's it's not it's very simple. You just enter the notes. Remember the highest note. The highest notes are going to be on the upper left corner. You see the highest note. So the highest note will be on this side, more to the left. Of the note, the chord you're checking. You see, we're going to go into detail. I'll go into detail soon enough. I'm just giving an overview so that when I present what the spread is, we could understand what we're doing with it, the use of it, and what the gap is something else, And this works for not just for the cello, the viola, the violin. It also works for guitar. Any lute family instrument, the lute family instrument, guitar. It could work for a mandolin. It works for all these things. You just put the notes, the open notes. They all have open, open string notes. The open string notes right here, and you put the notes you're trying to check on this side. And remember to put the position. And you just do that. You enter the differences between those. Of course, it doesn't have to end up being like that. Of course, in this case, even on this page, all of them do end up, being in the diagonal. But technically, they don't have to be in the diagonal. They don't have to. We'll see cases where they're not. And it still is playable. It just so happens that in all these cases, it was fine in the diagonal. And this is a real a piece of music I was working on. That, it's not like I, just wrote these examples for this video. Again, I'm not, there are, well, anyway, okay, so, and, for the violin, this one is only for those string instruments, the violin and instruments like this. It's a table I made. You see it from afar, but of course you can't see anything on it. And this table, you could check if a chord is playable just by checking this table. You could actually check, and yeah, so you can actually find out, as I said, you could find out if a chord could be played looking at this table, which I'll approach it when we're going to do it. So let's check one of these right here using the table, and so you see we have what are the distances? We have a C sharp 6, G sharp 5, and C sharp 5. And, let's take this one right here because I already calculated the distances here. I think that's what I'm writing right there. Yes, there are the distances. You see, the 4 means it's that the C sharp 5 is a fourth away from the G sharp 4. The 5th means that the G sharp 5 is a fifth away from the C sharp 4. If you could see the notes right there. And the last one, the 8, you see, the 8 means that it's that the C sharp 4 is an eighth away from the C sharp 3. So you get 4, 5, 8, a fourth, a fifth, and an 8. And how do you use this to verify? So you see, you see what I was talking about. It's like, those distances. So what you do is you look a fourth, a fifth, and an eighth right there. So you try to look in here. It doesn't matter where you start. You could start up, you could start down. So right here, we have the 4th, and we get to the 5th right here, up here in this column. We have the 5th, and now we look in the corresponding row for the 4th, which is the 3rd one. Is the 8 the 3rd column? In the 5th. Is it the 8 blue? Yes, it is. Right here. Right here, the 8th is blue. Right here. So you see that's how you do it with this table. You start with the 4th. It's on the 3rd column, you see, and the 5th row. The 5th. It's on the 3rd row, and the 5th column. You check if on the 5th column and you see the 3rd row, if the 8 is blue, and it is blue, that means that the chord can be played. If you only had 2, if you didn't have, and, we could, right here's another example, you have the G sharp 4, the C sharp 4, and the C sharp 3, and the G sharp 2, and you could verify, but I think I calculate on the side I wrote that it's a 5th, an 8th, and a 4th. A 5th, an 8th, and a 4th for that one. So you just look, if you have a 5th, you see, you look for the 5th right here, and you see if the fourth column, and the 5th is on the 4th row right here, and you see it's on the 4th row. Oh, that's this one, and you just look if the it was the 4th. Yeah, oh, it's a 5th and the 8th. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Yeah, so you see, it's as we said, it's a 5th, an 8th, a 5th, an 8th, and a 4th. 5th, 8th, 4th. Go in the table. You look for the 5th, and then you go to the 8th. You see right here, 5th, down to the 8th. See all the way down to the column of the 8ths, and you look if the 4th is in blue, and yes, it is. The 4th is in blue. See? So you see from afar, you look for the 5th, and you look where it matches the 8th, what column, and you know that you see the 5th is on the 4th row. You match it, so you go to the column of the 8th, and you look for the 4th, the 4th row, and you look for the the 4th in that row, and since it's in blue, if anything is in red, in pink, or in yellow on this table, it cannot be played. Cannot be played. Of course, that is ignoring things like open chord notes that could make something playable. This table, this way of doing it with the table is more general, and you don't have to worry about whether notes are whether they're notes of open strings. You don't have to worry about that. You can just put it into this table, and it works not just for the violin and the viola and the cello, and there's of course little differences. There are differences in some other rules are a little different for those instruments, but it works for the guitar. We will go over those differences. It works for the guitar. It works for the lute, all lute family instruments. Instruments where you're holding the strings and you're shortening them with the strings, and it just to motivate when we talk about the spread and the gap, and we're going to have to cover a lot of examples to show it. You see, so remember, you just take the biggest entry minus the smallest is smaller than or equal to the spread, and the smallest one has to be smaller than the gap, and we'll explain what those are. And yes, and please, remember to like and subscribe, and and see you next time.